Okay, good afternoon or good morning, and welcome to this webinar where we will learn how to navigate the Latin American gaming landscape with Vixio's tools and coverage. My name is Jack Halliday, and I'll be running today's webinar. Before I hand over to today's speakers, I would like to remind all attendees to please engage as much as possible by asking questions. If you have any audio or visual issues or questions during the broadcast, please message in the chat box. I also want to remind you that today's session is being recorded and a full version of the recording will be sent out after the webinar. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over to today's webinar speaker, Kailey Cheng.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Kailey. I am a Senior Client Value Specialist here at Vixio. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and I'm here today with Matt Ashton, one of our Senior Legal Analysts, also here with me in D.C. Hey, Matt, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. We're excited to get started here. So first, an introduction for those of you who don't know about Vixio. We are a regulatory technology company serving both the gambling and payments industries. We're a trusted source of independent, authoritative, and actionable regulatory intelligence. As you guys must know, both the gaming and payments industries undergo rapid and radical change. So we're here to deliver comprehensive, time-sensitive, and actionable intelligence. We cover more than 180 jurisdictions across the globe, and we organize it by product or service type. So in today's webinar, we will be looking at showing you how to use the Latin America versions of our responsible gambling overview and advertising overview tools, two of the many tools available to Vixio gambling compliance subscribers. Firstly, to set the scene, we'll explain what they are and how they work. Then we'll use the tool to run some comparisons of gambling advertising regulations in various jurisdictions. We'll also be highlighting an interactive map and a special report on Brazil. So throughout this, Matt and I will have some conversations about notable insights and analyses that can be gleaned from using the tools. And then finally, we will close with some audience questions at the end. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So Matt and I will showcase the new tools now. These tools were created to ensure that you guys and your organizations are up to date with the quickly evolving Latin American market. So if you hover over My Tools at the top right corner, Vixio has tons and tons of tools to help you out here, but we will be focusing on the advertising comparative overview tool, as well as the responsible gambling overview tool for Latin America. So why don't we go ahead and get started with the advertising tool? So the layout of this tool will be the same kind of across the board. If I scroll down here, you guys can kind of see all these different parameters regarding responsible advertising, such as warning messages, age and vulnerable persons restrictions, so on and so forth here. So if you hover over any of these parameters, you can see how Vixio defines them here. On the left side, you will see all the jurisdictions that we're currently covering. There should be 9 of them at the moment. And this green yes means that there are parameters put in place for any of these jurisdictions. And if you click on any, it'll take you straight to that parameter here or article. Going back, you can also select specific parameters. So for example, if we wanted to look at sponsorship restrictions in Brazil, in Buenos Aires City, and Peru, you can also type it in, and if it's checked off, you will get that there. Hit done. You can see the 3 flags of the different provinces we chose here. We can hit compare. And this is a different way you can kind of compare as well. So here you can see the 3 different jurisdictions we chose, whether or not there are restrictions, and the references here. So I'm going to hand it over to Matt here to kind of discuss why we chose these 3 jurisdictions today.
Yeah, thank you, Kailey. I think we chose the sponsorship restrictions kind of because we have these 3 jurisdictions that show the different levels of regulation throughout the region on these sponsorships. And then sponsorship does seem to be at the forefront of most marketing conversations and advertising conversations. So if we look at the first one, and kind of the most mature market or the more strict market is Buenos Aires City. Argentina, as we know, does regulate online gambling by province rather than at a federal level. So just kind of like in the US, with all the states having each of their own regulations, Argentina is the same. And Buenos Aires City is one of the biggest jurisdictions within Argentina, and they do have pretty strict sponsorship restrictions. So you'll see in those two articles, they do prohibit public figures and athletes from entering into marketing deals with operators unless they are strictly promoting responsible gaming through that sponsorship. They also do prohibit stadium sponsorships, so the naming of stadiums or the naming of teams as well through gambling and gaming operators, which is along some of the more strict regulations you'll see for sponsorships in the region. If we go to a more medium approach or kind of in the middle there, it's Brazil with their new regulations, as they haven't started a fully regulated online market yet, but they have just recently announced all of the regulations. They have decided to take the approach of their federally licensed operators will be allowed to sponsor national sports teams, but they must be licensed federally. They do have the unique situation in which states are currently trying to license operators specific to their states, and that's kind of a whole different legal battle they're going through right now. But Article 18 actually does address it and say if a Brazil or in a state, they have to contain that sponsorship to that state. So we have yet to see how that'll play out, but that's definitely something we'll be looking for. And then lastly, you have Peru, which has advertising restrictions, as you can see in the tool for other requirements we've highlighted. But in terms of the sponsorship, they haven't decided to address it specifically through their regulations. So you'll see in our tool that the no questions or the no answers usually are just the case of they're not specifically addressed in the regulations. And that's the route Peru took. So kind of the three different approaches to these sponsorship restrictions, just kind of highlighting what this tool will do and really how it helps put everything into perspective, really.
Great. Thanks, Matt, for giving us some of those insights. So this was the advertising comparative overview tool. Now I'm going to navigate to the RG version. So that, again, will be in My Tools. Scroll down to Responsible Gambling Overview for Latin America, hit that. And similar to the advertising tool, you're going to see those 9 jurisdictions again, but with different parameters. These ones are exclusive to responsible gambling. So for example, we have the financial limits, time requirements, customer interactions, so on and so forth here. So kind of looking at this at a high level overview, similar to the advertising tool, you're able to put in parameters, you're able to select jurisdictions, but you could also just kind of look at it holistically like this. It really paints a picture of, what the markets look like. Matt, you're going to talk us through some of this, especially kind of looking at Mexico. There's a lot of no's there.
Yeah, I think the unique feature about our tool for Latin America, kind of different than our European and North American tools, is that we currently only have 9 jurisdictions on it. So you can kind of fit the whole tool on one page. So it really gives a good perspective of where each country and jurisdiction are in terms of responsible gaming or advertising. So if we kind of look at the responsible gaming here, you'll see a lot of yeses. And I think that's kind of a product of the way Latin America has gone about regulating their markets. They really wanted to focus on bringing in the offshore markets into a regulated framework. And that can be done through responsible gaming. And that's really kind of the focus of a lot of the regulations, is making sure they're protecting their bettors that are participating in online gaming. So a lot of the regulations are tailored specifically for responsible gaming, and why we get a lot of yeses. As you pointed out, Mexico does receive a lot of no's. And that's just kind of a product of the situation Mexico is currently in and kind of was built on. Their market was based off an interpretation of the law on their random number generators, in which the courts interpreted that specific section of the law allows for online gaming previously. So their market has been set up based off that interpretation without a real, framework for regulations of online gaming. They have full regulations for land-based gaming, and that's where you'll see the two yeses coming in responsible messages and responsible advertising, because that goes across online and land-based, but you won't really see regulations that specifically identify the online gaming, responsible gaming part of the market. I know currently we're dealing with a situation where the former president of Mexico did release a decree that overturned those court interpretations and specifically prohibited online gaming. So they are not renewing licenses for online gaming currently, but that's of course in a pretty big legal battle that we've been watching closely and hoping we get some updates soon from. But overall, as a full tool here, you'll see a lot of yeses in the Latin America market. The only one you really see the no's as well is the reality checks, and I think that kind of comes from just not really hitting the Latin America market yet. In the U.S. and European markets, you've seen reality checks become more and more of a thing, with each jurisdiction really wanting some sort of notification that comes up and says, "Hey, you've been gaming for a long period of time. Are you sure you want to keep going?" I think you see Brazil and the two Argentinian provinces have those yeses because they have, Argentina is the more mature market, and then Brazil, with being the most recently released regulations, have kind of taken a lot from other markets. I think the no's come from a place of they just haven't gotten to that point yet, and haven't turned their regulations into kind of that more mature where you're looking at responsible gaming specific requirements. But yeah, that's kind of the overview of the responsible gaming tool we have.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that explanation. That makes perfect sense. So again, this is found in the My Tools bar here under Responsible Gambling Overview. The other one was called Advertising Comparative Overview Tool. So now we're going to move on to one of our interactive maps. So let me actually show you guys how to navigate there first. And I'm going to go hover over research and click on guides. So this is where all of our research guides, any kind of interactive maps or reports will be housed. And the best way to navigate this section is to actually go to this right-hand side here where it says refine your results. And I'm gonna actually do it through geography and hit Latin America and the Caribbean. So here you can kind of see some resources here, but what I do want to show you guys today is this interactive map. It's going to kind of showcase the regulatory outlook all across Latin America regarding online gambling. So this is a really cool tool where you can kind of hover over each country and it will show you the status of that country. So for example, we see that Brazil is regulated. We can see that Guyana is unregulated, but we're going to really highlight, Matt's going to kind of highlight the state monopolies such as Chile and Uruguay. So if you want to start with Chile, Matt.
Yeah, so I like to think of this map as kind of the starting point for research into the region. People like to think Latin America as a region as a whole, but then you realize it's a bunch of different countries. So this map really will provide that starting point of where each country is in terms of online gaming. And we decided to break it down into regulated, unregulated, and then the state monopoly. So if we focus on that state monopoly tag, Chile is a unique one in which we call it a state monopoly because lottery, the only authorized online gaming is through their lottery. They're state-ran lotteries, but there are two different operators through the state that are operating through the state. And they offer online lottery modalities, which are essentially online gaming tools or platforms. And you know, there's been recent news of the legislation pending in Chile in which they're trying to open it up to a more regulated market. But that, of course, is going through the discussions and the process of becoming a law that we're watching closely. But kind of that fight between the state-ran lotteries versus right now they do have a little bit of an offshore market, and they're trying to find that right balance as they go into. But if you go over then to Uruguay, they have more of a traditional one operator state monopoly, in which that operator does allow lottery modalities online. I believe they do have one that is a form of sports betting as well online. So the DNLQ operates those online modalities in Uruguay as the only operator, and it's ran through the state where the profits go to the state government. So yeah, those are the two monopolies we wanted to highlight. And then, as you scroll over, you can see just kind of a little paragraph of those current situations. You'll see the Mexico situation, which is going on there. But yeah, to use this as kind of the starting point of where you want to research, or if you don't know too much about a country, this will give you that entry point in which you can kind of stem off of and focus your research into certain parts of that online gaming in that country specifically.
Yeah, 100%. I really just love the simplicity of this map. Just makes it really easy to understand, like you were saying, Matt, just if you're first really getting into any of these countries. So we're going to actually move on to our final tidbit of information here. It's a little more than the tidbit, actually. We are going to be looking at one of our Brazil online gambling reports. So it has recently been at the top of our homepage here, but you could also find this in the research guide section as well. If you had filtered to Latin America, you'll definitely see it there. So I'm just going to click on this. It's the special report, Brazil Online Gambling Regulations. This was written by Matt. So I'll hand it over to you, Matt, to kind of go over this brilliant piece of work you put together.
Thank you. Yeah, I kind of took the lead. I had a lot of help from a lot of people here at Vixio. So we're really excited about this report. And the one thing I do want to point out is that 288-minute read is just a suggestion of all the content. This report is really meant to break down the regulations in a more digestible way and really allow our clients to take the pieces they need specific for their teams or their entity to enter into the market and stay compliant within the Brazilian market. So the way Brazil has decided to legalize and then regulate the market has been pretty unique and allowed this opportunity to build this report off. So our earliest version of this report was basically breaking down each of their, originally they announced 11 ordinances. They've fully released all the ordinances, I believe like 2 weeks ago at this point, and it's only been 10 as they combined 2 of their originally announced. So the first version of this report really took a stab at kind of predicting what those ordinances would answer and would be about. So we had a table where, questions we expect them to answer, kind of the background from the law of what we could expect from the regulations, and then questions we're hoping they would answer in those ordinances. But now, as all those ordinances have been released, we've been able to update this report into a couple different tables that we hope will help the clients break down each of these ordinances, each of the regulations, and get them in the hands of the right people at their companies and really prepare them to launch in Brazil and then prepare them to stay compliant while in Brazil. Because we've seen from these ordinances, Brazil is going to be pretty heavily regulated and kind of unique in the market, but well worth it with how big that market's going to be. So if we break down one of these ordinances here, the first table we have is one we call interested entities, which will tell you what entity should be focusing on this ordinance. Now, this isn't like an end-all be-all. Everybody should kind of be focused on these ordinances, but this is what we suggest, who the most obligated entity would be. So we give that to you, and then we tell you what teams within that entity will want to pay attention to this ordinance, and kind of why we think that. So then the next table is our unique requirements table, and that's where we went through the ordinance and pulled out some of the sections or the articles that we thought were either very important in terms of whether it's important for the launch of the platform or for staying compliant or for like a tech build out that may take a little longer. So we've bolded those out and brought them into a new table and kind of the bolded areas is showing you why we think it's unique or important. And then after the unique regulations, it's going to take you to a full regulatory breakdown of the ordinance. That's where we've gone through each of the articles and pulled them out and tried to put them into a row in which they all apply to one specific requirement. So what we're hoping that does is, you can be reading this, you can hit the Control F button, type in a requirement you want to focus on, and that'll take you to the specific articles, which we have cited as well, and allow you to focus specifically on those requirements. So if it's a unique requirement like the KYC requirements, or I know Brazil is going to require some sort of facial recognition in those KYCs that you want to get to your frauds and payments teams or to your KYC providers, you can take this part of the report and send that out to the specific teams within your entity that need to know about that, because I don't believe any one team is going to want to sit and see all of the ordinances and go through the full ordinance. So hopefully that helps you kind of get the right people, the right information in a reasonable amount of time. And then lastly, we have kind of the follow-up from the previous editions of this report, in which we have tables with questions answered and questions left unanswered. So these questions answered are kind of those questions we asked in the beginning that we hope the ordinance would address and how they addressed them. And so we pull those out and answer them if the ordinance does answer them. The questions left unanswered are a bit of a mix of questions that may not have been answered from our previous edition, as well as new questions that have risen from the publication of the ordinances, a lot of times more along the lines of how it's going to work in practice, and seeing if we can answer that or kind of pose that question so that people who may be asking those same questions can kind of confirm their thinking with other people as well. So hopefully this report helps operators and entities out as best as they can. As we're really excited about the report and sharing it now.
Awesome. Thanks for going over that. So again, we can go to research and guides and find that there. But I also want to point out that we have an in focus tab just for Brazil online gambling. And if I click on that, you can also find the report in the reference library as well. So that should be under here at the very bottom, special report. So that's just another place where you can find it. We also have some other special reports you guys can read about in your own time, some Q&As, as well as our regulation tracker too. So those are just some really great resources that we provide as well. So with that, I'd like to move on to some questions. So let me see what we have so far. Okay, great. So I'm going to start off with this first question here. And again, before I get started on these questions, this is how you can submit the questions as well. But I'll read the first one here out loud. So in the US, we have seen a trend of regulatory focused shift to advertising and responsible gaming requirements. Have we seen the same in Latin America, or do we expect the same shift? And I'll give that to you, Matt, to answer that one.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I guess you kind of think of that shift in the US to responsible gaming and advertising as that kind of second wave. The first wave being really getting a regulatory framework set up, getting operators licensed, and moving over from that offshore or gray market. In terms of Latin America and kind of the progress we've seen for that shift, I think it's kind of a mixed bag. Latin America, again, is a bunch of different countries that have a very different timelines. So you'll see the more mature markets like in Argentina and Colombia, where they have started to turn to a focus on responsible gaming and advertising as they have that setup of licensed operators. I know some of the regulators there are kind of training operators as well as affiliates on those advertising practices and responsible gaming practices. I think for the newer markets, Peru, Brazil, some of those markets, it'll be first about getting licensed operators, getting the bettors on licensed platforms, and then moving again into that into that responsible gaming and advertising focus. but the regulations definitely are addressing them. It's just a matter of when we'll see the enforcement actions come into fruition.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that makes sense. All right, moving on to the next question. This one is asking, Latin America has a big industry with influencers. So how have we seen regulations address the influencer market?
Yeah, so influencers are a big deal in Latin America, and those are, primarily focused on making sure they know the regulated market, know they're promoting a regulated game, an authorized game, and not some of the offshore gaming sites. And the issue with influencers is a lot of times their market is a younger age. So regulators have really tried to focus on it. I know I've seen Brazil has a huge market with influencers, and I know our editor Talia has done some reporting on kind of the actions Brazil has taken already against some of these influencers when they're promoting unauthorized games. But in terms of regulations and kind of actions of the regulators, I know Colombia has had meetings they've held with influencers to educate them on gaming space, and Brazil's greater to ensure the people they're doing business with and having market their platform understand the rules, and ultimately the operator will be held responsible for those affiliates.
Awesome. Another question for you, Matt. So with Brazil being in focus, are there any unique features or trends in responsible gambling and advertising that have been a surprise or just important to note?
Yeah, kind of figured Brazil would be a big topic in this webinar, but yeah, going through creating that report, there were definitely a lot of instances where some of the regulations did stand out to me. Thinking about some of the responsible gaming one, I know they have a lot to do with the monitoring of bettors on the platform, making sure operators are aware and do kind of interrupt bettors if they see it, if they see a pattern of problems. And then the big one, they do prohibit bettors with diagnosed problem gambling issues from even being registered on the platform. That's going to be an interesting one to see play out once that market comes in, and how operators will deal with that. But definitely a unique regulation for responsible gaming there. In terms of advertising, I think that's kind of a follow-up of that last question with the influencers. I think they are going to be pretty strict with those. I do remember one of the articles addressing specifically the contracts with marketing affiliates. Those are going to, they must be available to those regulators. So operators are going to have to allow the regulators to review those contracts if they ask. So I think those are some of the unique regulations we've seen from Brazil so far.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. We have another question, and I can answer this one, as this has to do with the product. So this person is asking, why did the tools only cover 9 jurisdictions? So I would say these 9 jurisdictions are the quote unquote hottest jurisdictions, as you guys can imagine, as they have more specific parameters put in place regarding responsible gambling and advertising regulations. So at the moment, those will be the only ones we do cover, but are open to requests. So if you guys, want to see anything else, please let me or Matt know, and we can definitely talk about that. So yeah, that wraps up the questions. So I will hand it over to Jack to wrap up the webinar.
Thank you, Kailey and Matt. And of course, thank you to our audience for attending today's session. Apologies if anyone experienced any audio or visual issues during the broadcast. As mentioned at the start of the session, this webinar was recorded and a video will be sent to all attendees in the coming days. Finally, if you have any questions about anything discussed in today's webinar or would like further information, please email info@vixio.com or visit the website vixio.com for more information. Thank you.